You know, when you picture a middle school science classroom, you probably imagine like a kid hunched over a microscope.
Right, yeah. Squinting at a glass slide.
Exactly. They're squinting, they're looking for these tiny mechanical building blocks of life, just trying to find some immediate visible truth in this highly controlled environment.
A very Western, sterile approach to science.
Yeah. But what if the most powerful scientific instrument in that room isn't a lens that looks closer, but like a perspective that looks backward?
Oh, I like how you phrase that.
Thanks. Because, I mean, when middle schoolers in Alaska are asked to recount their genealogy and family history, they aren't just, drawing lines on a chart. They are actually mapping an ecosystem.
They really are.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are digging into Alaska Cultural Standard A2 to see what it actually takes to turn the lens away from the microscope and toward ourselves, and to really explore what it means to recount family history.
And making that shift in perspective, it totally changes the entire definition of what we even consider data.
Right. Because we're looking at this huge stack of educational frameworks, the Alaska Native Knowledge Network protocols and the BioForge curriculum. And a really fascinating tension emerges right at the very start.
Yeah, the wording itself.
Exactly. The standard asks students to recount their genealogy and family history. And the curriculum explicitly demands that educators treat those two terms differently.
Because they're definitely not synonyms, right? Like looking at the framework, genealogy traces the structural, biological, or I guess legal relationships among people across generations.
Yes, it's the lineage map. Who begat whom?
Right, it's the structure.
Yeah.
But family history, that includes the stories, the specific places, the movements across the land, the traditions, languages, the challenges, and the choices that actually shaped that kinship network.
That's a crucial distinction. It's like, okay, if genealogy is the architectural blueprint of a house, family history is the memory of, every Thanksgiving dinner, every scraped knee, and every late night conversation that actually happened inside that house.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. The blueprint just tells you where the walls are.
Right. Doesn't tell you what it felt like to actually live there.
Exactly. And to take that idea beyond just the walls of a house, Klingit and Inupiat culture bearers share this incredible framework to help students visualize this. They call it the forest analogy.
Okay, the forest analogy, how does that work?
So an individual student is a single tree, and the surrounding trees represent their immediate and extended family.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the entire forest represents the broader community. So genealogy might just measure the physical distance between the trunks, but family history maps the intertwined root systems.
Oh, wow. I love that. Because in a forest, trees actually share nutrients, right?
Exactly. They share nutrients, they communicate chemical signals about threats, they shelter one another from the wind.
So it's an active ecosystem.
Right. By understanding those connections, a seventh grader learns that their scientific inquiry is actually rooted in this 11,000-year legacy of human relationships with the land.
Rather than just like memorizing a textbook chapter on genetics.
Precisely. It bridges biological inheritance with ecological continuity.
That makes total sense. Yeah. It takes the concept of belonging entirely out of a filing cabinet and puts it into the real world.
It really does.
But, okay, if the goal is to understand that intertwined root system, we have to talk about how a student actually gathers those stories. Because we aren't just talking about spitting into a tube for a DNA test here.
Definitely not. The sources outline a massive array of discovery methods.
Yeah, the list is huge. I mean, we're talking public records, archives, photographs, physical objects.
Names and naming traditions are a big one, too.
Right. Maps, letters, journals, recipes, songs, artwork, just this massive pool of community knowledge. And a huge piece of that community knowledge comes from conversations and oral histories.
And this right here is where we see a massive paradigm shift in the classroom. Because people outside of this cultural context often hear the phrase oral history, and they just assume it means, like, folklore or myth.
Right, like fairy tales.
Exactly. But in indigenous science, oral history is a highly rigorous, multi-generational qualitative data set.
A data set? That's such a different way to think about it.
It really is. Traditional ecological knowledge is based on centuries of systematic observation. So the curriculum encourages students to document their family's ecological history.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Well, for example, noting how the blooming of wild roses historically correlated with the arrival of specific salmon runs, and then tracking how that seasonal timing has changed over, say, 3 generations of a family's harvesting practices.
Wait, I never actually thought of it that way. I mean, if modern Western thermometers have only been tracking the temperature of a specific Alaskan river for, I don't know, 40 years,
Right, instrumental records up there are relatively recent.
then the only way to know the baseline ecological conditions from 200 years ago is the family story about when the ice historically broke up.
Exactly. The story is the data.
That is wild.
Yeah.
The story literally is the data.
And that data is incredibly precise. I mean, if you want to understand long-term climate anomalies or animal migration shifts, you absolutely have to consult the people who have been passing down these structured empirical observations of that specific microenvironment for hundreds of years.
Because their survival depended on it.
Completely.
Yeah.
The survival of a community depended on the accuracy of those observations. You couldn't get it wrong.
Okay, that completely elevates the assignment. But I do have to ask about the execution here. Because a 12-year-old on a homework mission can be remarkably blunt.
Oh, definitely. We've all met middle schoolers.
Right. So how do they gather this highly specific data without it feeling like an interrogation? Because just shoving a microphone in an elder's face and saying, tell me about the salmon in 1950, that doesn't seem like it really respects the weight of that knowledge.
No, it doesn't. And the curriculum actually anticipates that exact problem.
Mm.
There are localized protocols that students are required to follow.
Okay, like what?
One of the most common ones outlined in the sources is often referred to as the chore and tea protocol.
Chore and tea, wait, really?
Yeah. Before a student ever asks a single question about history or ecology, they first have to complete a practical chore for the elder or family member.
Oh, wow. So they have to do some work first.
Exactly. Depending on the community, that might mean hauling water or splitting firewood, maybe sweeping. The principle is that you do not extract knowledge until you have offered your own energy.
It establishes a baseline of reciprocity.
Right. You're showing that you are there to be a helpful, contributing member of the community, not just some researcher mining for quotes.
I love that. And then the tea part.
Right. So after the chore, the second phase is sharing tea or coffee. And this forces the student to just, slow down.
Right, because kids are always rushing to get the worksheet done.
Exactly. They are trained to allow for long silences and pauses. They learn to recognize that storytellers often use silence to structure their thoughts or to recall a specific detail.
So they aren't just jumping in to fill the quiet.
No. The student observes not just what is said, but how and where it is said. The data collection really becomes this deep exercise in relationship building. And then they leave a small gift of thanks at the end.
That is so respectful. But that chore and tea protocol kind of assumes the elder you're pouring tea for actually has those stories to tell, right? Or is, like, willing to share them.
Yes, that's a very valid point.
Because what happens when those cultural transmission lines were intentionally severed? I mean, I want to address reality that a lot of you listening right now will probably relate to. Family structures and family knowledge vary wildly.
They really do. There is no one-size-fits-all.
Right. Some students can trace their history back generations in a single place, but others have histories that are incomplete or uncertain, painful, private, or just completely inaccessible.
And educators face some really complex realities here. The sources highlight that a student's history might be disrupted by adoption, foster care, migration, displacement, or, just deeply personal boundaries.
Yeah, family separation or loss.
Exactly. And beyond those individual circumstances, the documents detail the broader historical trauma that has impacted Alaska Native communities. Events like Uyurok, this period of devastating epidemics that just decimated populations.
It broke the natural chain of knowledge.
Right. It massively disrupted the intergenerational transmission of language and survival systems.
And the frameworks point out that this trauma was also intentionally compounded by imported boarding school systems, right?
Yes, profoundly so.
Because these institutions systematically punish students for speaking their heritage languages or practicing their cultural traditions, which created these huge generational disconnects.
It did. Colonization deeply impacted these kinship networks.
If we go back to that ecosystem framework, it's basically like a massive forest fire just cleared an entire patch of trees.
But the ecological metaphor holds up beautifully even there.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, if a forest fire clears a patch of trees, the ecosystem isn't broken or invalid. It's just entering a new stage of succession.
Oh, that's a great point.
The new growth is just as vital. So the curriculum has strict pedagogical safeguards to protect kids. Students should never be pressured or singled out or forced to reveal private, traumatic, sacred, or culturally restricted information.
Because forced disclosure is just a straight-up violation of student privacy.
Absolutely. Biological descent is not the only meaningful form of belonging, and the frameworks are very clear. Missing information is never a personal failure.
I really want to make sure we underline that for anyone listening who has ever dreaded that, blank family tree poster project.
Oh yeah, the classic elementary school assignment.
Right. It's like reading a fascinating book where some chapters were torn out. The missing pages don't make the story you do have any less valid or important.
Beautifully said.
But I am curious about the actual mechanics of the assignment. If a student does opt out, if a student cannot or just does not want to trace their own biological family tree, what do they actually do instead?
So the framework relies on universal design to offer empowering alternatives.
Wait, universal design. Usually that means like building wheelchair ramps or adding closed captions so a building or a video works for everyone right from the start.
Right.
How does that translate to a genealogy assignment?
Well, in education, universal design basically means creating multiple pathways to the exact same learning objective.
Okay.
If the learning objective here is to understand continuity, adaptation, and connection to place, you don't actually need a biological human family tree to achieve that.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. So if tracing a personal lineage is unsafe or impossible, a student can research the lineage of a historic regional figure instead. Or they can trace the evolutionary genealogy of a local species.
Like an animal.
Exactly. A student might map the phylogeny of the Pacific salmon. They can research its anadromous adaptation, like how its physiology actually alters to survive that crazy transition from freshwater rivers to saltwater oceans and back again over thousands of years.
They are still studying inheritance and adaptation just applied to a non-human community member. That's brilliant.
Or they could trace the material history of a traditional tool.
Oh, like what?
They might study the structural design of snowshoes over the last 2 centuries, or the insulation efficiency of caribou fur parkas, and how the specific stitching techniques evolved to block the wind.
Wow.
The student still learns how a network adapts to its environment over time.
That completely removes the anxiety of like biological conformity. But let's look at the students who are gathering their own family stories for a second.
Okay.
Because family histories naturally include multiple perspectives. I mean, my siblings and I can't even agree on what happened on a family vacation 5 years ago, let alone 3 generations ago.
Oh, memories can differ wildly.
Totally. And public records can be notoriously incomplete or incredibly biased. So let's say a student sits down for tea with an aunt who says the historic fishing camp was by the big river bend.
Okay.
But then a grandfather insists it was further upstream. What does this all mean when 2 sources contradict each other? Like, how does a middle schooler handle conflicting family lore?
That scenario actually demands real scientific rigor. The curriculum teaches students that family stories must be treated with both deep respect and thoughtful source evaluation.
So you don't just blindly write down whatever the first person says.
Right. When faced with conflicting information, students practice a skill called cognitive frame switching.
Cognitive frame switching. I am struggling to picture this because, I mean, if a 7th grader is looking at a precise temperature data set from a Western biologist and then a deeply relational story about a raven from an elder, they aren't equipped to merge those, are they?
Well, they don't have to merge them.
It just seems like they'd pick the one that's easier to write a paragraph about and ignore the other.
And that is the exact trap that cognitive frame switching prevents. It teaches students to analyze and move between different types of data without flattening one into the other.
Okay, walk me through that.
So they learn to evaluate the context of the memory. Maybe the aunt and the grandfather actually fished different runs of salmon. Or maybe the river physically changed course over 40 years, so they're both right about their specific time frame.
Oh, that makes sense.
The student looks at a Western data set that offers these precise, localized physical measurements, and then they switch frames to look at a relational oral narrative.
Right.
And that narrative provides the behavioral patterns of the animals over a century, plus the human relationships necessary to interpret those physical measurements accurately.
Wow. So they aren't trying to use the oral history to, like, prove the Western science or vice versa.
Exactly. They exist alongside each other.
It's kind of like looking at a landscape with 2 different lenses. Like, one shows you the thermal heat signatures and the other shows you the visible light.
That's a perfect analogy.
They might look completely different, and you really can't combine them into a single image, but they are both telling you something deeply true about the exact same forest.
And part of evaluating those different lenses brings up a massive component of the curriculum, which is the ethics of sharing what you find.
Oh, right. Privacy.
Because just because a student collects data or hears a story doesn't mean they actually have the right to publish it on a poster board in a public hallway.
Yeah, that makes sense. In a world where we are just so used to mining content for likes or for grades, it's really easy to forget that some knowledge isn't meant for everyone.
Yes, the concept of knowledge sovereignty and the principle of cause no harm are deeply embedded here.
Knowledge sovereignty, I like that term.
It's crucial. Certain stories, certain dances, ceremonial practices, or even specific harvest locations, those are the intellectual property of specific families or clans.
So it's literally proprietary.
Exactly. The curriculum mandates that educators and students respect that ownership.
Mm.
Students are explicitly taught to ask, who actually owns this story? Do I have explicit prior authorization from the family members or authorized tribal entities to share this in a classroom?
That is a lot of responsibility for a kid.
It is, but it teaches them early on that knowledge is a living thing. It requires a relationship and carries profound responsibility.
It really forces the student to become highly reflective about their own position in the world. And honestly, these frameworks aren't just for seventh graders in Alaska.
No, they apply to all of us.
They are tools for anyone trying to understand their place in the world. So we want to invite you listening right now to reflect alongside these students. Just think about your own life for a moment. Who are the people and the relationships that have actually helped shape you?
Consider the places that anchor your family or your community story. What places are important? And how has knowledge, whether it's a trade, a value, a warning, or just a family recipe, been passed from one generation to another in your life?
Think about what parts of your family story can actually be verified with a document or a public record, and what parts remain beautifully uncertain, living only the memories of the people who tell them.
And applying that idea of knowledge sovereignty, who actually has the right to tell or share a particular story in your family. How can we preserve history without claiming knowledge that simply is not ours?
Because recounting family history is a continuous process. It's not just a one-and-done assignment. It means gathering, organizing, interpreting, and respectfully carrying forward the stories, the places, and the relationships that help locate us in time.
It grounds us in this warm, expansive understanding of belonging that goes way beyond just biological descent.
It's the difference between looking at an isolated slide under a microscope and finally stepping back to see the entire ecosystem.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a final thought to really mull over.
Yeah, what's that?
If our personal histories are constantly being rewritten by the new connections we make, the new environments we inhabit, and the choices we exercise, what stories are you actively creating today that someone 100 years from now might look back on as their family history?
Wow. What will your foundational layer in their forest look like? Something to think about. Until next time.